When a struggling single father agrees to pose as a billion-dollar CEO's boyfriend in a supermarket aisle, he thinks he's solving one problem. He has no idea he's walking into a war. Victoria Hale didn't build her empire by playing fair, and her enemies won't let her keep it without a fight. Ethan Cole just wanted to save his job and protect his daughter. Now he's standing in boardrooms where lies cost millions and truth might cost everything. One handshake, one desperate lie, and two lives that will never be the same. If you're watching from halfway across the world or right down the street, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Save Mart hummed like they've been doing it for 30 years and plan to do it for 30 more. Ethan Cole stood in the cereal aisle with his hand hovering over a box of off-brand cornflakes, doing math in his head that didn't add up no matter how many times he ran it. Lily's school shoes were falling apart. The car needed an oil change 2 months ago. And if Patterson Foods went through with the layoffs everyone was whispering about, none of it would matter because they'd be eating nothing but rice and hoping the landlord had a heart. He grabbed the cornflakes, put them back, grabbed them again. "Daddy, can we get the ones with the tiger?" Lily stood next to the cart, 7 years old and still young enough to believe that cereal mascots mattered more than price tags. Her blonde hair was pulled into a ponytail that had started neat this morning and gone sideways by lunch. She wore her favorite purple jacket even though it was too warm for it, because Ethan had learned a long time ago that some battles weren't worth fighting. "Not this week, kiddo. But you said, maybe next time. And last time you said next time, so this is next time." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't anger. It was the worst thing, the feeling that he was failing at the one job that actually mattered. "I know," he said. "I know I did." Lily's face did that thing where it tried to be brave and disappointed at the same time, and Ethan wanted to throw every box of name-brand cereal into the cart and deal with the consequences later. But consequences were the only thing he had left to manage. He put the off-brand box in the cart. "How about we make pancakes on Sunday?" he offered. "The really good ones with chocolate chips." Lily's expression shifted just enough. "With whipped cream? Don't push it." She grinned, and that grin was worth more than anything Save Mart sold. They moved through the store like they'd done 100 times before. Ethan checking prices, Lily campaigning for things they couldn't afford. Both of them pretending this was normal and fine. The store was busy for a Wednesday evening. Too many people who looked like they were doing the same math Ethan was doing, filling carts with things that would stretch until Friday. He was reaching for a gallon of milk when he heard the voice. "Victoria, we need to talk." It came from the end of the aisle, and it had the kind of authority that made people stop and look even when they didn't mean to. Ethan glanced over and saw a man in a suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Tall, mid-40s, graying at the temples in that way that looked intentional. He was standing too close to a woman who clearly didn't want him there. The woman was striking in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or effort. Dark hair pulled back, sharp features, wearing jeans and a blazer like she'd just come from somewhere important and was trying to pretend she hadn't. But it was her expression that caught Ethan's attention. Controlled, locked down, the kind of face someone made when they were used to being watched. "I don't have anything to say to you, Richard." Her voice was quiet, but it carried. Ethan told himself to look away, to move on, to remember that other people's problems weren't his business. But Lily had stopped to look at the juice boxes, and he found himself listening without meaning to. "You can't avoid me forever," Richard said. "The board's asking questions. Your investors are nervous, and walking away from me doesn't change the fact that you're in over your head. I'm exactly where I need to be. You're CEO of a company you don't understand, playing a game you're not equipped for. And everyone knows it." Richard smiled, and it was the kind of smile that wasn't meant to be kind. "How long do you think you'll last? A year? 6 months?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "Longer than you want me to. This isn't about what I want. It's about reality. You took my position, my company, my legacy, and you think you can just walk into boardrooms and make it work because you're smart and determined?" He laughed, short and cold. "They're going to eat you alive." Ethan saw her fingers curl into a fist at her side, saw the way her breathing stayed even though everything else about her said she wanted to explode. He recognized that control. He'd used it himself every time someone at work made a comment about single dads, or asked where Lily's mom was like it was casual conversation. "I don't owe you an explanation," Victoria said. "No. But you owe the board one. And when you can't deliver, when the numbers don't add up, and the strategies fall apart, they're going to come looking for someone who actually knows what they're doing. Someone like you. Someone competent." That was when Victoria turned her head and locked eyes with Ethan. It happened fast. 1 second she was staring Richard down, and the next she was looking past him, scanning the aisle like she was searching for something. Her gaze landed on Ethan, held for half a second, and then she moved. She walked straight toward him. Ethan's brain didn't catch up until she was 3 feet away, and by then it was too late to do anything but stand there with a gallon of milk in one hand and confusion on his face. "Hi," Victoria said, and her voice had shifted into something warmer, something performative. "Sorry I'm late." Ethan blinked. She reached out and took his free hand. Her grip was firm, deliberate, and absolutely uninvited. Ethan felt his pulse kick up, felt Lily's eyes on him, felt the entire situation tilt sideways into something he didn't understand. "I got held up at the office," Victoria continued, squeezing his hand just hard enough to send a message he couldn't decode. "You know how it is?" Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Victoria's eyes were locked on his, and in them he saw something he recognized because he'd felt it himself more times than he could count. Desperation. "Play along," she said under her breath, so quiet he almost missed it. She said under both their sides. Richard had followed her, stopping a few feet back with his arms crossed, and an expression that was half confusion, half suspicion. "Victoria," Richard said slowly, "what are you doing?" She turned, still holding Ethan's hand, and smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Richard, this is Ethan, my boyfriend." The word landed like a rock in still water. Ethan felt his stomach drop, felt the weight of the lie settle onto his shoulders like someone had just handed him a live grenade and told him not to drop it. "Your boyfriend," Richard repeated, and his tone made it clear what he thought of that. "That's right." Victoria's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. "We've been seeing each other for a few months now. I just haven't mentioned it because, well, it's personal." Richard's gaze shifted to Ethan, scanning him from head to toe in a way that felt like an audit. Ethan was suddenly, painfully aware of his worn jeans, his faded jacket, the fact that he was holding store-brand cornflakes, and a gallon of milk like props in a play he hadn't auditioned for. "Months, bites," Richard said. "Yes. And you didn't think to mention it." "Why would I?" "You and I aren't together anymore, Richard. My personal life isn't your business." Richard's jaw worked. "Right, of course." He looked back at Ethan. "And what do you do, Ethan?" Ethan's mouth was dry. His brain was screaming at him to say something, anything, but the words weren't coming. He felt Lily tugging on his jacket, felt the weight of too many eyes, felt the entire moment spiraling into something he couldn't control. "He works in production," Victoria said smoothly, answering for him. "At Patterson Foods." Richard's eyebrows lifted. "Patterson? How practical." The condescension in his voice was thick enough to cut. Ethan felt heat crawl up the back of his neck, felt the old familiar anger that came from being looked at, like he didn't matter. "It's a good job," Ethan said, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "I'm sure it is." Richard's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "And how exactly did you two meet?" Ethan's mind went blank. He looked at Victoria, who looked back at him with an expression that said, "Help me out here." And for one terrible second he thought about walking away, about taking Lily and the cart and leaving this woman to deal with her own mess. But then he saw it again, that desperation, that look of someone backed into a corner with no good options. He knew that look. He lived that look. "Coffee shop," Ethan said. "A few months back, she spilled her latte on my shirt." Victoria's eyes widened just slightly, and then she smiled. "And I offered to pay for the dry cleaning." "You offered. I said it was fine. But I insisted." "You did." They were improvising now, building a story out of nothing, and Ethan felt like he was walking a tightrope in the dark. Lily was staring up at him with wide eyes, and he knew she was going to have questions later that he didn't have answers for. Richard watched them both with an expression that said he didn't believe a word of it. "How charming," he said flatly. "A real meet cute." "It was," Victoria said. Unexpected, but good. And you just happened to run into each other here. We're shopping for dinner. Together. That's generally how it works when you're dating someone, Richard. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. Ethan felt sweat starting to gather at the small of his back. Felt Lily's hand slip into his free one, small and warm and trusting. Well, Richard said after a long pause, I suppose congratulations are in order? He didn't sound like he meant it. I hope you know what you're getting into, Ethan. Victoria has a way of making things complicated. I can handle complicated, Ethan said, and he wasn't sure if he was still playing along or if he'd just said something true. Richard's smile was sharp. We'll see. He looked at Victoria. I'll see you at the board meeting next week. Try to bring your A game, or at least a strategy that isn't held together with duct tape and hope. He walked away without waiting for a response, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The moment he was out of sight, Victoria let go of Ethan's hand. The absence of her touch felt sudden, disorienting. Ethan stood there with his arms still half raised, his brain trying to catch up with what had just happened. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and she sounded like she meant it. I shouldn't have. That was completely out of line. Yeah, Ethan said. It was. I panicked. I noticed. Lily tugged on his jacket again. Daddy, who is that lady? That. Ethan looked down at his daughter, at her confused, curious face, and felt the weight of the lie settle deeper. Just someone I helped out, kiddo. It's nothing. But she said you're her boyfriend. She made a mistake. It didn't sound like a mistake. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second, searching for patience he didn't have. When he opened them, Victoria was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I know this is, she started. Insane, Ethan offered. Completely insane? I was going to say irregular. That's one word for it. Victoria glanced at Lily, then back at Ethan. Can we talk? Just for a minute. I don't think that's a good idea. Please. There was that desperation again, threaded through her voice like a crack in glass. Ethan wanted to say no, wanted to walk away, and pretend this had never happened. But he'd already said yes once, already played along, and now he was standing in the middle of Save Mart with a stranger who'd just turned his evening into something out of a bad movie. Fine, he said. 1 minute. Victoria looked at Lily. Is it okay if I borrow your dad for just a second? We'll stay right where you can see us. Lily frowned but nodded. Ethan and Victoria stepped a few feet away, just far enough that Lily couldn't hear but close enough that she could watch. Ethan crossed his arms and waited. That man, Victoria said quietly. Richard. He's my ex-husband. Congratulations on the divorce. It's complicated. Everything about the last 5 minutes has been complicated. Victoria took a breath. He used to be the CEO of Hale Industries. I took over 3 months ago after the board voted him out. He's been trying to undermine me ever since. And I care about this why. Because he's dangerous. He has allies, influence, and a vendetta. And if he thinks I'm weak or vulnerable, he'll use it to destroy everything I've worked for. Ethan stared at her. So you grabbed a random stranger and declared him your boyfriend. It was the first thing I could think of. That's a terrible instinct. I know. Victoria ran a hand through her hair, and for the first time she looked less like a CEO and more like a person who was barely holding it together. Look, I'll pay you. For your time, for the inconvenience, for whatever you need. Just, if anyone asks, if he asks, can you back up the story? Just until I get through the board meeting next week? Ethan laughed, short and humorless. You want to pay me to pretend to be your boyfriend? Yes. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. Probably. I have a daughter. I know. I have a job that's barely holding on, a life that's already complicated enough, and exactly zero interest in getting tangled up in whatever corporate drama you've got going on. Victoria nodded. I understand, and I'm sorry for dragging you into this. I'll figure something else out. She turned to go, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that he'd been doing math in his head all day, and none of it added up. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him, desperate and drowning and trying not to show it. How much? He asked. Victoria stopped, turned back. What? You said you'd pay me. How much? I... She hesitated. What do you need? $10,000. The number came out before he could think about it. Absurd and impossible, and exactly what he needed to cover rent, bills, Lily's school expenses, and the car repairs he'd been putting off for months. Victoria didn't blink. Done. Ethan felt his stomach drop. You're serious? Completely. For 1 week. For 1 week, just until the board meeting. Show up to a couple of events, maybe a dinner, back up the story if anyone asks. That's it. Ethan looked over at Lily, who was inspecting the cereal boxes with the focus of a scientist. Looked back at Victoria, who was watching him like he was the answer to a problem she couldn't solve on her own. He thought about the envelope in his kitchen drawer, the one with final notice stamped on it in red. Thought about the conversation he'd overheard at work yesterday, the one about how the layoffs were starting next month, and the line workers would be the first to go. I want half up front, he said. Victoria pulled out her phone. What's your account number? You're really going to transfer me $5,000 right now, in the cereal aisle. Do you want the money or not? Ethan gave her the number. 30 seconds later, his phone buzzed with a notification that made his hands shake. Deposit, $5,000. He stared at the screen, read it twice, felt like he was watching someone else's life. The rest when the week's over, Victoria said, and if you do this, I need you to commit. Richard's smart, and he's watching. If this falls apart, it'll be worse than if I'd never done it at all. What exactly does commit mean? It means we need to be convincing. It means if we're seen together, we act like a couple. It means you'll need to come to at least 2 public events with me, 1 charity gala on Friday and the board meeting next Wednesday. A gala. Black tie. I'll cover the tux rental. Ethan looked at her like she'd just suggested they rob a bank. I don't own a tux. That's why I said rental. I don't go to galas. You do now. This is insane. Yes, Victoria agreed, but you already said yes. She was right. He had. The moment he'd asked for the money, the moment he'd given her his account number, he'd stepped off the edge into something he didn't fully understand. 1 week, Ethan said. 1 week. And then we're done. Completely. He looked at Lily again. She'd moved on to the juice boxes, reading the labels like they contained secrets. She trusted him. She believed in him. And here he was, making deals with strangers in grocery stores because he didn't know how else to keep the lights on. If this blows up in my face, Ethan started. It won't, Victoria said, and she sounded more confident than she had any right to be. You don't know that. No. But I know I'm good at what I do, and I know how to manage a situation. This is just temporary crisis management. With a fake boyfriend. With a convincing partner. She held out her hand. Do we have a deal? Ethan looked at her hand, at the $5,000 sitting in his account, at Lily, who deserved better than off-brand cornflakes and a father who was barely scraping by. He shook Victoria's hand. We have a deal. By the time Ethan got Lily home, fed, and into bed, it was past 9 and his brain felt like it had been through a blender. He sat on the couch in the living room of their apartment, small, clean, held together with secondhand furniture and determination, and stared at his phone. The deposit was still there. Real. Undeniable. He pulled up his bank app and started moving money around. Rent, utilities, car payment. The numbers shifted from red to black, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt like he could breathe without something sitting on his chest. His phone buzzed. Unknown. Number. This is Victoria. I'll send you the details for Friday's event tomorrow. Thank you for doing this. Ethan stared at the message, typed out a response, deleted it, typed it again. Ethan. Just so we're clear, I have no idea what I'm doing. The reply came back almost immediately. Victoria. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. Ethan set the phone down and leaned back against the couch, closed his eyes, tried to convince himself that he hadn't just made the worst decision of his life. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice that sounded suspiciously like his late mother was asking what the hell he thought he was doing, getting mixed up with a woman like that. A woman with money, power, and an ex-husband who looked at people like Ethan like they were obstacles to step over. But the voice was quiet, and the numbers in his bank account were loud, and for tonight, that was enough. Victoria sat in the back of her car, watching the city lights blur past the window, and wondered if she'd just made a brilliant move or a catastrophic mistake. Ethan Cole, single father, factory worker, completely unprepared for the world she was about to drag him into. And yet, there'd been something about him, the way he'd stood there with his daughter, doing mental math over cereal boxes. The way he'd looked at Richard with barely concealed anger when the condescension got too thick. The way he'd said, "I can handle complicated," like he actually believed it. She pulled out her phone and opened the file on Richard's latest moves. He was building a case, she knew. Collecting evidence, turning board members, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now he thought she had a boyfriend, someone stable and normal and completely removed from the corporate battlefield. Let him think that. Let him dig into Ethan's background and find exactly what he'd expect. A regular guy with a regular job and no skeletons worth mentioning. It was a gamble. A big one. But Victoria hadn't gotten to where she was by playing it safe. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "Caroline, the gala guest list is finalized. Press will be there. Are you sure about bringing a +1? Victoria typed back without hesitation. Victoria, absolutely sure. His name is Ethan Cole. Add him to the list. She hit send and watched the message disappear into the void. 1 week. That's all she needed. 1 week to stabilize her position, get through the board meeting, and prove to Richard and everyone else that she wasn't going anywhere. And if that meant turning a grocery store encounter into a carefully managed performance, so be it. She'd done harder things. She'd survived this too. She had to. Ethan woke up at 5:30 the next morning to Lily jumping on his bed. "Daddy, you have to take me to school. We're doing presentations today, and I'm going first and I can't be late." He groaned and pulled the pillow over his head. "What time is it?" "Time to get up." "Lily, it's not even 6. "But I need to practice my presentation." Ethan gave up on sleep and dragged himself out of bed. The apartment was cold, the heater still struggling to keep up, and his back hurt from the couch springs that had been dying a slow death for the past year. He made breakfast, toast, scrambled eggs, orange juice from concentrate, and listened to Lily run through her presentation about the water cycle. She had notes written on index cards and a poster board she'd decorated with markers and glitter that was already shedding onto the kitchen floor. "That sounds great, kiddo," Ethan said when she finished. "Do you think Mrs. Patterson will like it?" "She's gonna love it." "What if I forget what to say?" "Then you look at your cards. That's why you made them." Lily nodded, but she looked nervous. Ethan reached over and squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this," he said. "I promise." They drove to school in the car that desperately needed an oil change, listening to a kid's radio station that played the same 5 songs on a loop. Ethan walked Lily to the front doors, watched her disappear into the building with her poster board held high, and felt the familiar mix of pride and worry that came with being a parent. His phone buzzed as he was getting back into the car. "Victoria, the gala is at the Rosewood Hotel, Friday at 7 p.m. Tux rental is covered. I'll send you the details. Let me know your size." Ethan stared at the message. Let the reality of what he'd agreed to settle back in. A gala at the Rosewood Hotel with a woman he'd met in a grocery store less than 24 hours ago. He typed back. "Ethan, 42 regular, 32 waist. This is really happening?" Victoria, "It's really happening. And Ethan, thank you. I know this is asking a lot." Ethan, "You're paying me $10,000. It's asking exactly that much." Victoria, "Fair point." He drove to work feeling like he was moving through someone else's life. Patterson Foods sat on the edge of town, a sprawling facility that smelled like grease and flour and had been there since before Ethan was born. He clocked in at 7, put on his hairnet and gloves, and took his place on the production line. The work was repetitive, numbing, the kind of thing that let his mind wander even while his hands stayed busy. He thought about Victoria, about Richard, about the look on Lily's face when she'd asked who that lady was. "Hey, Cole." Ethan looked up. Marcus, one of the other line workers, was standing a few feet away with his arms crossed and a grin that said he knew something. "Yeah? Heard you're on the list." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What list?" "The layoff list. Jenkins was talking about it in the break room. Said they're cutting 20% of the line workers starting next week." The world tilted slightly. Ethan kept his hands moving, kept his face neutral, even though his brain was screaming. "Where'd you hear that?" he asked. Jenkins heard it from someone in HR. They're finalizing the names today. Ethan wanted to ask if Marcus was on the list too, but he already knew the answer from the way Marcus was looking at him, relieved, guilty, trying not to show it. Great, Ethan said flatly. Maybe it's just a rumor. Yeah, maybe. But it wasn't. Ethan knew it wasn't. He'd been at Patterson long enough to know how these things worked. The company was struggling, margins were tight, and the people on the bottom were always the first to go. He made it through his shift on autopilot, clocked out at 3, and sat in his car in the parking lot with his phone in his hand. Victoria had said she'd save his job. That was part of the deal, wasn't it? Or had he imagined that part? He scrolled back through their texts, found the message. Victoria, pretend to be my partner until the board meeting, and I'll save your job. Right. She'd said it. She'd offered it. But how exactly was a CEO with no connection to Patterson Foods supposed to save his job? The whole thing felt like a fantasy, a promise made in the heat of the moment that wouldn't survive contact with reality. Ethan started the car and drove home. Lily was at a friend's house for the afternoon, which meant he had a few hours to himself. He sat at the kitchen table, opened his laptop, and did what he probably should have done before agreeing to any of this. He looked Victoria Hale up. The search results came back fast. Victoria Hale, 34, new CEO of Hale Industries. First woman to lead the company. There were photos of her at press conferences, in boardrooms standing next to people in suits who all looked like they'd graduated from Ivy League schools and summered in the Hamptons. There were articles about her rapid rise, her aggressive strategies, the way she'd outmaneuvered Richard Hale in a corporate coup that had made headlines 3 months ago. And there were opinion pieces. Lots of them. Can Victoria Hale handle the pressure? Hale Industries' risky bet on inexperience. Why Richard Hale's ousting might be the company's biggest mistake. Ethan read through them, piecing together a picture of a woman who was brilliant, driven, and walking a tightrope without a net. She'd taken over a company in crisis, pushed out a CEO who'd been there for a decade, and was now fighting to prove she deserved the position. No wonder she'd panicked in the grocery store. No wonder she'd grabbed onto the first halfway decent lie she could find. Ethan closed the laptop and rubbed his eyes. 1 week. That's all he had to survive. 1 week of pretending to be someone he wasn't, in a world he didn't belong to, for money that would keep him afloat just long enough to figure out what came next. He could do that. Probably. Maybe. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Tux will be ready for pickup tomorrow. I'll send the address. And Ethan, we should meet before Friday. Go over the details, make sure we're on the same page. Ethan. When? Victoria. Tomorrow night? I can come to you or we can meet somewhere neutral. Ethan thought about his apartment, about Lily asking questions he didn't know how to answer, about the whole situation getting messier than it already was. Ethan. Neutral. There's a diner on 5th called Marlene's, 7 o'clock. Victoria. I'll be there. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. 1 week. He could do this. He had to. Marlene's diner had been on 5th Street for 40 years and looked every day of it. The vinyl booths were cracked and patched with duct tape. The linoleum floor had worn patterns where thousands of feet had shuffled through, and the coffee tasted like it had been brewed sometime around noon and left to die a slow death on the burner. But it was cheap, it was open late, and nobody asked questions. Ethan got there at 6:45, ordered coffee he didn't want, and sat in a booth by the window where he could watch the street. His knee bounced under the table. He'd left Lily with Mrs. Chen from down the hall, told her he had to meet someone about work, which wasn't technically a lie but felt like one anyway. At 7 exactly, a black car pulled up to the curb and Victoria stepped out. She looked different than she had at the grocery store. More polished, more controlled. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in dark waves, and she wore a coat that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. She scanned the diner through the window, spotted him, and walked in. The bell above the door chimed. A few people looked up, registered that she didn't belong here, and went back to their food. Victoria slid into the booth across from Ethan. This place is very authentic. It's a diner. I can see that. A waitress appeared, looking tired and unimpressed. Coffee? Please, Victoria said. Black. The waitress poured, sloshed some onto the saucer, and walked away without a word. Victoria looked at the coffee like it might bite her. You don't have to drink it, Ethan said. No, it's fine. She picked up the cup, took a sip, and her face did something complicated. That's certainly coffee. I warned you it wasn't great. You said it was a diner. You didn't say it was a culinary crime scene. Ethan felt the corner of his mouth twitch. You picked neutral. This is neutral. Victoria set the cup down and folded her hands on the table. Fair enough. She pulled a folder out of her bag and opened it between them. I brought copies of everything you'll need to know. Background on Hale Industries, profiles of the key board members, details about Friday's event. Ethan looked at the papers. They were organized, color-coded, the kind of thing someone made when they had assistants and time to care about presentations. You made a dossier, he said. I made a reference guide. That's a dossier. Do you want the information or not? Ethan pulled the folder closer, scanned the first page. It was a company overview, complete with revenue charts, market position, and a paragraph about how Hale Industries had been a family business for 3 generations before Victoria took over. How much of this do I actually need to know? He asked. Enough to sound like you've been paying attention for the past few months. If someone asks what I do, you should be able to say more than business stuff. You run a manufacturing conglomerate specializing in industrial components and supply chain logistics. Victoria blinked. You memorized that from the website? I can read. Most people's eyes glaze over at supply chain logistics. I work in a factory. Logistics is half of what keeps the lights on. She looked at him differently then, like she was recalibrating something. Right, of course. Ethan flipped to the next page. It was a list of names with photos attached. Board members, executives, people who looked like they spent their weekends playing golf and their weekdays deciding other people's futures. These are the people who'll be at the gala? He asked. Some of them. The gala is mostly donors and investors, but the board members will be there, especially Richard. He's still on the board? He's the largest minority shareholder. I couldn't push him out completely, just out of the CEO seat. That sounds like it would make things awkward. That's one word for it. Victoria took another reluctant sip of coffee. Richard's smart. He knows exactly how to work a room, how to plant doubt without saying anything actionable. He'll be watching us on Friday, looking for cracks. And if he finds them, then he'll use them to convince the board that I'm unfit to lead, that I'm distracted, unstable, making poor decisions. Ethan set the folder down. So, no pressure. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't think you could handle it. You don't know me. I know you didn't walk away when you could have. I know you showed up here even though you probably have 100 better things to do. That's enough. Ethan wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She wasn't wrong. He'd shown up. He'd taken the money. He was sitting here reading corporate dossiers in a diner that smelled like old grease because some part of him had already committed to seeing this through. Tell me about Friday, he said. Victoria straightened, shifting into what Ethan was starting to recognize as her CEO mode. The gala starts at 7. Cocktail hour, then dinner, then speeches, and an auction. We'll need to arrive together, stay together for most of the night. There will be press, nothing major, just local outlets and some industry blogs, but they'll take photos. Photos that will end up online. Yes. Where anyone can see them. That's generally how the internet works. Ethan rubbed his face. My coworkers are going to see this. My neighbors. Lily's teacher. Will that be a problem? I don't know. Maybe. People talk. Let them talk. You're dating someone. That's not a crime. I'm dating a CEO who's worth more than my entire neighborhood combined. That's going to raise questions. Victoria leaned back against the booth. What do you want me to say, Ethan? That this won't be complicated? It will be. That people won't judge? They will. But you agreed to this, and unless you want to back out now and return the $5,000, we're doing it. Her tone was sharper than it needed to be, and Ethan felt his own frustration rise to meet it. I'm not backing out, he said. I'm just trying to figure out how to explain this to a 7-year-old who's going to see pictures of her dad at some fancy event and want to know why she wasn't invited. Victoria's expression softened. You haven't told her. Told her what? That I made a deal with a stranger to pretend to be her boyfriend for money? Yeah, that'll go over great. You could tell her you're helping someone out, that it's temporary. She's 7, not stupid. She'll ask questions. Then answer them. With what? The truth? Part of it. The part that makes sense. Ethan laughed, low and bitter. None of this makes sense. They sat in silence for a moment, the diner's ambient noise filling the space between them. Someone dropped a plate in the kitchen. The jukebox in the corner cycled to a song that had been old when Ethan was born. "I'm sorry," Victoria said finally. "I know this isn't fair to you or to your daughter." "No, it's not. But I'm paying you $10,000 to make it fair." "Money doesn't make things fair. It just makes them expensive." Victoria looked at him, and for a second the mask slipped. She looked tired, worn down, like someone who'd been fighting for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. "You're right," she said quietly. "It doesn't." Ethan picked up his coffee, took a drink even though it tasted like burnt regret. "Tell me what I need to do on Friday. Walk me through it." Victoria pulled herself back together, piece by piece. "We arrive together. I'll have the car pick you up at 6:30. We walk in, we smile, we make small talk. If someone asks how we met, we stick to the coffee shop story. If they ask how long we've been together, we say 3 months. Why 3 months? Long enough to be serious, short enough that it's reasonable I haven't mentioned you publicly. And if they ask about my job? You tell the truth. You work at Patterson Foods. You're a production line supervisor." "I'm not a supervisor." Victoria waved a hand. "Close enough. It sounds better than line worker." "It's also a lie." "It's an embellishment. There's a difference." "Not really." "Ethan, do you want this to work or not?" He met her eyes, saw the challenge there, the desperation underneath it. "Yeah, I do." "Then trust me. I've been managing perceptions my entire career. I know how to sell a story." "This isn't a story. It's my life." "For this week, they're the same thing." Ethan wanted to argue, but he was too tired and she was too certain. He flipped through the folder again, scanning names and faces he'd never remember. "What about Richard?" he asked. "What do I do if he corners me?" "He will. Count on it." Victoria's jaw tightened. "He'll try to get under your skin. Ask questions that sound innocent but aren't. Make you feel like you don't belong." "I don't belong." "That's not the point. The point is you can't let him see that you think that. You need to act like you have every right to be there. Like you're comfortable, confident. I'm a factory worker going to a gala at the Rosewood Hotel. Comfortable isn't on the menu." "Then fake it." "I'm not good at faking things." Victoria leaned forward. "You faked it in the grocery store. You came up with the coffee shop story in about 3 seconds and made it sound believable. You're better at this than you think." Ethan wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an accusation. "And after the gala? What then?" "Then we keep up the appearance for a few more days, maybe one more public event, something smaller. And then the board meeting on Wednesday." "You want me at the board meeting?" "No. But I need you visible enough beforehand that Richard can't claim I invented you. A few photos, a few witnesses, that's all. And then we break up. Clean and simple. You'll get the other 5,000, and we go our separate ways." Ethan looked at her, at the careful way she was holding herself together, and wondered what would happen when this was over. When the performance ended and she was left standing alone in boardrooms full of people waiting for her to fail. "You really think this will work?" he asked. "I think it's the best option I have." "That's not the same as yes." "No, it's not." The honesty surprised him. He'd expected her to be all confidence and polish, but there was something raw underneath it. Something human. "Okay," Ethan said. "Friday, 6:30. I'll be ready." Victoria nodded, started gathering the papers back into the folder. Then she stopped, her hand resting on top of the stack. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why did you say yes? In the store when I grabbed your hand. You could have walked away. Most people would have." Ethan thought about it, about the look in her eyes, the way she'd been backed into a corner by a man who thought he owned her past and her future, about the way he'd felt every time someone at work looked at him like he was disposable. "I know what it's like," he said finally, "to need help and not know where to get it." Victoria's expression shifted. Something unguarded flickered across her face and was gone just as quickly. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. I haven't done anything." "You showed up. That's more than most people would do." She stood, left a 20 on the table even though the coffee was $3. and walked out without looking back. Ethan sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at the folder she'd left behind, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The next morning, Ethan got the call he'd been dreading. He was at work, halfway through his shift, when his supervisor pulled him aside. Gary was 50, balding, and had the perpetually exhausted look of someone who'd been middle management too long. "Cole, need to talk to you." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Yeah?" "Corporate's making cuts. You're on the list." The words hit like a punch. Ethan had known it was coming, had heard the rumors, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way that turned his blood cold. "When?" he asked. "2 weeks. They'll give you severance, 2 months' pay. After that, you're on your own." 2 months, 60 days to find another job in a town where factories were closing and nobody was hiring. "Is there any way to—" "No." Gary's voice was flat, final. "List's done. I'm sorry, Ethan. You're a good worker, but the numbers don't care." Ethan nodded, didn't trust himself to speak. He finished his shift on autopilot, clocked out, and sat in his car with his hands on the steering wheel and his mind racing. 2 months severance would cover rent and basics, but not much else. He'd have to find something fast. Retail, maybe. Delivery driving. Anything that paid. His phone buzzed. "Victoria. Tux is ready. Address is 412 Westwood Avenue. Pick it up any time before Friday." Ethan stared at the message, at the casual assumption that he had time to pick up a tux, that his life wasn't actively falling apart. He typed back before he could stop himself. "Ethan. Just got laid off, 2 weeks' notice." The response came fast. "Victoria. I'm sorry, do you need to back out?" Ethan. "No, I need the money more than ever now." Victoria. "Then we'll make sure you get it. And Ethan, I meant what I said. I'll help with your job situation. I have connections." Ethan. "At Patterson Foods?" Victoria. "Everywhere." He wanted to believe her. Wanted to think that someone with her resources and reach could make a phone call and fix everything. But he'd been around long enough to know that promises were cheap and follow-through was rare. Ethan. "We'll see." He picked up the tux on Thursday after dropping Lily at school. The shop was in a part of town he rarely went to, where the storefronts were clean and the people walking by looked like they'd never worried about rent. The woman at the counter pulled up his reservation, looked him up and down, and disappeared into the back. She returned with a garment bag and a pair of polished shoes that looked like they'd never touched pavement. "Ms. Hale took care of everything," the woman said. "If the fit isn't right, bring it back and we'll adjust." Ethan took the bag. "Thanks." He tried it on at home, standing in front of the bathroom mirror and feeling like an imposter. The tux fit perfectly, too perfectly, like it had been tailored for someone who wasn't him. The shoes were stiff and uncomfortable. The bow tie took 3 tries to get right. Lily knocked on the door. "Daddy, why are you wearing that?" Ethan opened the door. "I have to go to an event tomorrow night, for work." Lily's eyes went wide. "You look fancy." "I look ridiculous." "Oh, no, you look like a prince." Ethan crouched down to her level. "It's just a work thing, kiddo, nothing special." "Is the lady from the store going to be there?" His chest tightened. "Yeah, she is." "Is she really your girlfriend?" "It's complicated." That's what grown-ups say when they don't want to explain. Ethan sighed. "You're too smart for your own good." "Mrs. Chen says that too." He pulled her into a hug, felt her small arms wrap around his neck, and wished he could freeze this moment before everything got more complicated. "I'll be back late tomorrow," he said. "Mrs. Chen's going to stay with you." "Can I stay up and see you when you get home?" "If you're still awake, sure." "I'll be awake. We'll see." Friday came faster than Ethan wanted. He spent the day anxious and distracted, checking his phone every 10 minutes, running through conversation scenarios in his head that all ended badly. By the time 6:30 rolled around, his hands were shaking. He put on the tux, fixed his hair, stared at himself in the mirror, and barely recognized the person looking back. The car arrived exactly on time, black, sleek, with a driver who opened the door and said nothing. Ethan climbed in, feeling like he was entering a different world. Victoria was already inside. She wore a dress that was dark blue and elegant, the kind of thing that probably had a designer name attached to it. Her hair was up, her makeup subtle, and she looked every inch the CEO she was supposed to be. "You clean up well," she said. I feel like I'm wearing a costume.
You look fine. Better than fine. Ethan tugged at the bow tie. This thing is choking me. Leave it alone.
You'll get used to it. The drive to the Rosewood Hotel took 20 minutes through traffic that Ethan usually avoided. The city looked different from the back of a car like this. Cleaner, shinier, like someone had polished all the rough edges away. Victoria was quiet, staring out the window with an expression he couldn't read. Nervous? Ethan asked. Always. You don't look it. That's the point. The hotel appeared ahead of them, lit up like something out of a movie. Red carpet stretched from the entrance to the curb. Photographers clustered on either side, cameras ready. Ethan's stomach flipped. Are you kidding me? It's a charity gala. There's always press. You didn't mention photographers. I mentioned press. Press means photographers. That's not the same thing. The car pulled to a stop. The driver got out, came around, and opened Victoria's door. She stepped out into a storm of camera flashes. Ethan took a breath. Told himself he could do this. Told himself it was just one night. He got out of the car. The flashes intensified. Questions were shouted from the crowd, half of them lost in the noise. Victoria appeared at his side, slipped her hand into his, and smiled like this was the most natural thing in the world. Just walk, she said under her breath. Smile, don't look at the cameras. They walked up the red carpet together, hand in hand, while photographers shouted Victoria's name and asked who Ethan was. He kept his eyes forward, kept his expression neutral, and tried not to trip over his own feet. Inside, the hotel was all marble and chandeliers and people who looked like they'd been born wearing formal wear. A string quartet played in the corner. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than Ethan's grocery bill. Victoria grabbed 2 glasses of champagne and handed one to Ethan. You're doing great, she said. I haven't done anything yet. You walked the carpet without passing out. That's something. A man in a gray suit approached, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Victoria, good to see you. Thomas, you remember Ethan? Thomas looked at Ethan like he was trying to place a face he'd never seen before. Of course, Ethan, lovely to meet you. We met at the Patterson Quarterly, Victoria said smoothly. Last spring. Right. Of course. Thomas clearly had no idea what she was talking about, but he nodded anyway. And what is it you do, Ethan? I work in production at Patterson Foods. Ah, manufacturing, very hands-on. The condescension was subtle, but it was there. Ethan felt Victoria's hand tighten on his arm. Ethan's been instrumental in streamlining their logistics operations, Victoria said. He's brilliant with systems efficiency. Ethan nearly choked on his champagne. Thomas nodded like this made perfect sense. Well, we need more people like that. Good, practical thinkers. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Enjoy the evening. He walked away, already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. Systems efficiency? Ethan muttered. You said you understood logistics. I improvised. I load boxes onto pallets. And you do it efficiently. Ethan laughed despite himself. You're unbelievable. I prefer resourceful. They moved through the room, stopping to talk to donors and board members whose names Ethan forgot as soon as he heard them. Victoria introduced him each time with the same easy confidence, building a backstory out of half-truths and implications that somehow sounded more real than the truth would have. Ethan found himself relaxing into it, playing along, letting Victoria carry the conversation while he smiled and nodded and tried to look like he belonged. And then Richard appeared. He came from across the room, cutting through the crowd with the precision of someone who knew exactly where he was going. He wore a tux that fit him like a second skin, and his smile was all sharp edges. Victoria, he said, and Ethan, what a surprise. Richard, Victoria's tone was ice-wrapped in politeness. I didn't realize you were bringing a date tonight. Why wouldn't I? No reason. It's just unusual for you to mix personal and professional. People change. Apparently, Richard turned to Ethan. I've been doing some reading about you, Ethan. Patterson Foods, production line. Interesting career. It pays the bills, Ethan said. I'm sure it does. Must be quite a change, though, going from factory floors to events like this. I'm adaptable. I can see that. Richard's smile widened. Tell me, how does someone in your position meet a CEO? I'm genuinely curious.
Victoria opened her mouth to answer, but Ethan spoke first. Coffee shop, he said. She spilled her latte. I didn't make a big deal about it. We started talking. Turns out we had more in common than you'd think. More in common? Richard's tone was skeptical. Such as? We both know what it's like to work for something, to earn it instead of inheriting it. The words came out sharper than Ethan meant them to, and he saw Richard's expression flicker. Interesting, Richard said slowly. And how long have you two been seeing each other? 3 months, Victoria said. 3 months, and you've kept it quiet. I value my privacy. Of course you do. Richard looked between them, his gaze calculating. Well, I hope it works out. Victoria has a tendency to get distracted. It would be a shame if that affected her performance.
My performance is fine, Victoria said coldly. For now. Richard smiled. Enjoy the evening. He walked away, leaving tension hanging in the air like smoke. Ethan let out a breath. That was fun. He's testing us. I noticed. And you handled it well. I wanted to punch him. That would have been less helpful. They stood there in silence, watching Richard work the room, and Ethan realized that this was only the beginning. The rest of the gala passed in a blur of faces and conversations that all started to sound the same. Ethan smiled until his cheeks hurt, shook hands with people whose names slid out of his memory the moment they walked away, and tried not to think about how much the food on his plate probably cost. Victoria stayed close, her hand finding his elbow or the small of his back whenever someone new approached, a constant reminder that they were performing. By the time the auction started, Ethan's feet were screaming in the 2 new shoes, and he wanted nothing more than to go home, peel off the tux, and pretend this night had never happened. But Victoria bid on something, a weekend at some resort he'd never heard of, and won with a number that made his stomach turn, $15,000. For 2 nights in a cabin. That's insane, he muttered when she sat back down. It's for charity. It's for showing off. It's both. She looked at him. And it gives us an excuse to be seen together again. We'll go next month. I'm not going to some luxury resort with you. Why not? You'll have been paid by then. Consider it a bonus. Consider it weird. Victoria's mouth twitched. You're very principled for someone who agreed to fake a relationship for money. I have layers. Apparently. The gala finally ended around 11. They said their goodbyes, posed for a few more photos near the exit, and climbed back into the car. The moment the door closed, Victoria kicked off her heels and let her head fall back against the seat. That was exhausting, she said. You looked like you were having fun. That's called acting. Ethan loosened his bow tie, feeling like he could finally breathe. Did it work? Do you think Richard bought it? I think he's suspicious, but suspicion isn't proof. She turned her head to look at him. You did well tonight, better than I expected. Low bar. I'm serious. You didn't freeze up, you handled Richard, you made it believable. I lied to a room full of people. You played a role. There's a difference. Not really. They drove in silence for a while, the city lights streaking past the window. Ethan felt the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep tiredness that had nothing to do with the late hour. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Why do you care so much? About the company, I mean. It's just a job. Victoria laughed, short and humorless. It's not just a job. It's my family's legacy. My grandfather built Hale Industries from nothing. My father expanded it. And Richard... She stopped, her jaw tightening. Richard tried to run it into the ground, chasing short-term profits and his own ego. When the board finally saw through him, they gave me a chance to fix it, to prove that I could do what he couldn't. And if you fail, then I lose everything. The company, my reputation, any chance of being taken seriously in this industry again. She looked out the window. Richard gets to say I told you so, and everyone who ever doubted me gets to be right. Ethan heard the weight in her voice, the fear she was trying to hide. That's a lot of pressure. Yes, it is. What happens if you can't fix it? I will fix it. But what if you can't? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll have tried. And that'll have to be enough. The car pulled up in front of Ethan's apartment building. It looked smaller somehow, shabbier, next to the sleek black car and the woman in the evening gown sitting beside him. Thank you, Victoria said. For tonight. For all of it. You're paying me. You don't have to thank me.
I know, but I am anyway. Ethan opened the door, paused.
Victoria? Yeah? That thing you said about having connections, about helping with my job situation. Did you mean it?
I meant it.
Because I got laid off yesterday. 2 weeks and I'm done. Her expression shifted, something like guilt flickering across her face. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'm telling you now. I'll make some calls, see what I can do. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's me keeping my word. She met his eyes. I'll find you something, I promise. Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted to think that someone like Victoria Hale could make a phone call and change his life. But promises were easy, and follow-through was hard, and he'd learned a long time ago not to count on things that sounded too good to be true. We'll see, he said, and got out of the car. He watched it drive away, then climbed the stairs to his apartment. Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch, the TV playing some late-night talk show on mute. Ethan paid her, thanked her, and checked on Lily. She was out cold, sprawled across her bed, with her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Ethan sat on the edge of her bed and watched her breathe. She looked so small, so trusting, and he felt the familiar twist of fear that came with being solely responsible for another person's entire world. I'm trying, kiddo, he whispered. I'm really trying. She didn't stir. Ethan kissed her forehead and went to his own room, where he hung up the tux and collapsed onto the bed, still wearing the dress shirt and pants. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Photos are already up. We're trending on 3 industry blogs. Ethan opened the link she sent. There they were, frozen in a dozen different moments, walking the red carpet, talking to donors, Victoria's hand on his arm. They looked like a couple. They looked real. The comments were a mix of curiosity and speculation. Who was he? Where did he come from? How did a factory worker end up with Victoria Hale? Ethan closed the browser and stared at the ceiling. 1 week. He just had to make it 1 more week. The weekend passed quietly. Ethan took Lily to the park on Saturday, helped her with homework on Sunday, and tried not to think about the fact that he had less than 2 weeks left at Patterson Foods. He sent out a few job applications to places he knew wouldn't call back, updated a resume that looked thin no matter how he formatted it, and felt the creeping anxiety that came with knowing the clock was ticking. Victoria texted him twice, once to say the photos had gotten good traction, and once to remind him about a company dinner on Tuesday that she needed him to attend. Ethan. Another event? Victoria. Smaller. Just senior staff and a few key investors. Less press, more personal. Ethan. How personal? Victoria. Sit-down dinner. Conversation. You'll need to be able to talk about us like we're actually together. Ethan. We've been over this. Coffee shop, 3 months, systems efficiency. Victoria. Expand on it. Add details. Make it feel lived in. Ethan. You want me to lie better? Victoria. I want you to be convincing. Ethan stared at the phone, then typed back. Ethan. What's my favorite thing about you? Victoria. What? Ethan. If we've been dating for 3 months, I'd have a favorite thing. What is it? There was a long pause. Then, Victoria. Your sense of humor. You make me laugh when I forget how. Ethan read it twice. It was a good answer. Too good. Like she'd thought about it before he asked. Ethan. And what's your favorite thing about me? Victoria. You're steady, grounded. You don't play games. Ethan. Except the one we're playing right now. Victoria. Except that one. Monday came too fast. Ethan showed up to his shift at Patterson Foods knowing he had 9 days left. 9 days to finish out his work, collect his severance, and figure out what came next. The other workers had heard about the layoffs by now, and the floor had the tense, quiet energy of people waiting for bad news to get worse. Marcus found him during lunch break. Heard you went to some fancy event Friday night. Ethan looked up from his sandwich. How'd you hear that? Denny's girlfriend saw the photos online, said you were with some CEO. Marcus grinned. You holding out on us, Cole? It's not a big deal. Not a big deal? Man, you're dating a billionaire. She's not a billionaire. Close enough. What's that like? Ethan shrugged. Complicated. I bet. She got any friends? I'm not setting you up. Why not? I clean up nice. You really don't.
Marcus laughed, but there was something under it, a thread of envy, maybe, or resentment. Ethan couldn't blame him. Here Marcus was, still on the layoff list, still staring down unemployment, while Ethan was suddenly the guy going to galas and dating women who showed up in industry magazines. For what it's worth, Marcus said quietly, good for you. You deserve something good. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and finished his sandwich in silence. That night, Victoria called instead of texting. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Ethan's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Richard's been digging. He hired someone to look into your background. Of course he did. They're going to find the grocery store. Ethan sat up straighter. What do you mean? There's security footage. From the night we met. Someone leaked it to one of Richard's people. How do you know? Because I have people too. And they heard rumblings. Victoria's voice was tight. The footage shows me grabbing your hand. It shows us clearly not knowing each other before that moment. So he knows we lied. Not yet. He doesn't have the footage, but he's looking for it, and it's only a matter of time before he finds it. Ethan stood, pacing the small living room. What do we do? We get ahead of it. We control the narrative before he does. How? We tell part of the truth. Victoria paused. We say we met that night, that it was spontaneous, unexpected, that I was dealing with Richard and you stepped in to help, and it turned into something real. That's still a lie. It's a version of the truth that's easier to sell than what actually happened. Ethan rubbed his face. And you think people will buy it? I think it's better than getting caught in a complete fabrication. If Richard releases that footage and we're still claiming we met months ago, we're done. But if we reframe it first, we take away his weapon. When? Tomorrow night. At the dinner. I'll bring it up casually, like it's a charming story. You back me up. And if Richard calls us out anyway, then we double down. We make it about him being vindictive and obsessed with my personal life. Victoria's voice hardened. I've dealt with worse than Richard Hale. I can handle this. Ethan wanted to believe her, but doubt was creeping in, cold and insistent. This is getting out of control. I know. Maybe we should just... Don't. Victoria cut him off. Don't say we should stop. Not now. We're almost through this. Almost through this? The board meeting's still 2 days away. Anything could happen. And we'll handle it. Together. Ethan closed his eyes. Thought about the $5,000 already spent. The other $5,000 waiting on the other side of Wednesday. Thought about Lily asleep in the next room and the job applications gathering dust in his inbox. Okay, he said. Tomorrow night, we tell the new story. Thank you. Stop thanking me. You're paying me. I know, but I'm still grateful. She hung up before he could respond. Tuesday's dinner was at a restaurant Ethan had walked past 100 times but never imagined entering. The kind of place where the menu didn't list prices and the waiters moved like dancers. Victoria picked him up at 6, and this time she looked less polished, more worn down. Rough day? Ethan asked as they drove. Richard's making moves, talking to board members, planting seeds of doubt. About you or about us? Both. She stared out the window. He's good at this, making people question things without actually saying anything actionable. Sounds like a real piece of work. That's generous. The restaurant was small, intimate, with tables spaced far enough apart that conversation stayed private. Victoria led him to a private room in the back where 8 people were already seated, drinks in hand and conversations flowing. Ethan recognized a few faces from the gala. Thomas was there, along with a woman named Patricia, who'd asked him about manufacturing trends like he was an expert. The others were new, investors, senior staff, people whose eyes tracked him with open curiosity. Victoria made introductions. Ethan shook hands, smiled, and tried to remember names he knew he'd forget. They sat. Menus appeared. Ethan stared at options written in French and Italian and picked something that sounded safe. So, Ethan, Patricia said, leaning forward with the intensity of someone about to interrogate a witness. Victoria's been very secretive about you. Tell us everything. Ethan glanced at Victoria, who gave him a slight nod. Not much to tell, he said. We met a few months ago. Hit it off. But how did you meet? That's the interesting part. This was it. The moment Victoria had warned him about. Victoria set down her wine glass. Actually, it's kind of a funny story.
She smiled, and it looked almost genuine. We met at a grocery store. I was dealing with a difficult situation, and Ethan stepped in to help. A grocery store. Thomas sounded amused. How very normal. It was normal, Victoria said. That's what made it nice. No boardrooms, no strategy meetings, just two people in the cereal aisle. And you just started talking? Patricia pressed. Not exactly. Victoria looked at Ethan, and he saw the calculation in her eyes. I was having a confrontation with Richard, actually. He cornered me, started in on his usual routine about how I wasn't fit to run the company, and Ethan... She paused. Ethan saw what was happening and played along when I needed an out. The table went quiet. You're saying Richard was harassing you in a grocery store, Patricia said slowly. I'm saying he was being Richard. Pushy, condescending, relentless. And I made a split-second decision to pretend Ethan was with me so he'd back off. And Ethan just went along with it, Thomas said, skepticism thick in his voice. Ethan cleared his throat. She looked like she needed help. I figured I could spare a few minutes. That's very chivalrous, Patricia said, and Ethan couldn't tell if she meant it or not. It wasn't about being chivalrous, Ethan said. It was about not being a bystander when someone needed help. Victoria's hand found his under the table, squeezed once. And after that? Patricia asked. After that, we got coffee, Victoria said smoothly. Talked for a while. Turned out we had more in common than you'd think. Like what? Like we both know what it's like to work for something, to earn it instead of expecting it to be handed to us. The dig at Richard was subtle, but it landed. A few people shifted in their seats. That's quite a story, Thomas said. Very modern. It's the truth, Victoria said, and the conviction in her voice almost made Ethan believe it himself. The conversation moved on, but Ethan felt the weight of what they'd just done. They'd rewritten the story, built a new lie on top of the old one, and sold it to a table full of people who had no reason not to believe them. Dinner was served. Ethan ate food he couldn't taste and participated in conversations he'd forget by morning. But through it all, he felt Victoria's presence next to him, steady, controlled, playing her role with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. After dessert, people started to leave. Patricia cornered Ethan near the coat check. Can I give you some advice? She said. Sure. Be careful. Victoria is brilliant, but she's also under an enormous amount of pressure. Richard's not going to let this go, and you're caught in the middle of something that could get very ugly, very fast. I can handle it. Can you? Patricia looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. You seem like a good guy, Ethan. I'd hate to see you get hurt because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I appreciate the concern. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're a civilian who wandered into a war zone, and wars have casualties. She walked away before he could respond. In the car, Ethan replayed the conversation for Victoria. She's not wrong, Victoria said quietly. About what? About this being a war zone, about you being caught in the middle. I knew what I was signing up for. Did you? Because I don't think either of us knew how complicated this would get. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. Are you okay? He asked. Victoria laughed, and it sounded broken. No, not really, but I don't have the luxury of not being okay, so I keep going. That's not sustainable. I know. Victoria, don't. Please. I can't fall apart right now. I just need to make it through Wednesday. And then I can breathe. Ethan nodded. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Wednesday morning came with gray skies and the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. Ethan dropped Lily at school, went to work for what he knew was one of his last shifts, and tried to focus on the repetitive motions of the production line instead of the board meeting happening across town. His phone buzzed at 10:30. Victoria, it's done. Meeting went well. I'll call you later. Relief washed through him, brief and bright. She'd made it through. The gamble had paid off. But the relief didn't last. At noon, his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Cole? This is Jennifer Watts from Channel 7 News. I'm calling about your relationship with Victoria Hale. Ethan's blood went cold. I don't have anything to say. We've obtained security footage from SaveMart showing the first time you and Ms. Hale met. We're running a story tonight about the nature of your relationship and whether it was fabricated to manipulate the Hale Industries board. Would you like to comment? No. Mr. Cole. He hung up. His hands were shaking. He called Victoria. They have it, he said when she answered. The footage. They're running a story tonight. Who? Channel 7. Victoria swore, sharp and vicious. Richard leaked it. He waited until after the meeting so I couldn't do damage control. What do we do? I don't know. For the first time since he'd met her, Victoria sounded genuinely scared. I don't know. Ethan left work early, ignoring Gary's questions, and drove home with his mind racing. He turned on the TV at 6 and watched Channel 7's evening news with his stomach in knots. The footage was worse than he'd imagined. There he was, standing in the cereal aisle with Lily. There was Victoria, walking up to him like a stranger. The angle was clear, damning. They'd never met before that moment. The whole thing had been a setup. The anchor's voice was professional, detached. Questions are being raised tonight about Victoria Hale's credibility, after footage emerged showing the CEO staging a relationship with a Patterson Foods employee. Sources say the relationship was fabricated to counter claims by former CEO Richard Hale that Victoria was unfit to lead. Ms. Hale's office has not yet responded to our requests for comment. Ethan's phone exploded with notifications. Texts from Marcus, from neighbors, from people he barely knew. The story was everywhere. He called Victoria. She didn't answer. He called again. Still nothing. At 7, someone knocked on his door. Ethan opened it to find a reporter with a camera crew. Mr. Cole, can you comment on your relationship with Victoria Hale? He slammed the door. They knocked again. He didn't answer. His phone rang. Victoria, finally. Are you okay? She asked. No, there are reporters at my door. Don't talk to them. Don't say anything. Victoria, this is a disaster. I know. I'm working on it. Working on what? The story's out. Everyone knows we lied. We didn't lie. We told a version of the truth. A version that makes us both look like manipulative liars. Ethan, my daughter is going to see this. My neighbors, my coworkers, everyone is going to know I faked a relationship for money. Do you understand what that does to me? Victoria was quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was small. I'm sorry, I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen, and now we both have to live with it. I can fix this. How? I don't know yet, but I will. Just give me time. Ethan looked at Lily's closed bedroom door, heard the reporters still knocking, felt everything he'd tried to build collapsing around him. I want my money, he said. The other 5,000. I did what you asked. I want what you promised. You'll get it. When? Tomorrow. I'll have it sent tonight. Fine. Ethan's voice was flat, empty. And after that, we're done. No more calls, no more events, no more anything. This is over. Ethan, please. He hung up. The phone buzzed a moment later. A notification from his bank. Deposit, $5,000. He stared at the number, $10,000 total. Enough to keep him afloat for a few months. Enough to make the whole disaster almost worth it. Almost. The reporters finally left around 9. Ethan checked on Lily, still asleep, oblivious, and sat on the couch with the lights off and the TV playing news coverage of his own life falling apart. His phone buzzed again. A text from Victoria. Victoria, I'm going to make this right, I promise. Ethan didn't respond. He set the phone face down on the coffee table and closed his eyes. He'd made it through the week. He'd gotten paid. And he'd lost whatever shred of privacy and dignity he'd had left. Morning came with the kind of brutal clarity that made Ethan wish he could stay in bed forever. But Lily was already awake, standing at his bedroom door with her backpack on and confusion written all over her face. Daddy, Mrs. Chen says people are talking about you on the news. Ethan sat up, his head pounding from too little sleep and too much stress. Mrs. Chen shouldn't be telling you that. Is it true? Are you famous? No, kiddo, I'm not famous. But she said, I don't care what she said. Ethan's voice came out harsher than he meant it to, and he saw Lily flinch. He took a breath, softened his tone. I'm sorry. I'm just tired. Come here. Lily climbed onto the bed, settling in next to him. Are you in trouble? Kind of.
What did you do? I helped someone, and it got complicated. The lady from the store? Yeah, her. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Is she still your girlfriend?
Ethan wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all.
No, she's not.
Good. I didn't like her.
You didn't even talk to her. I didn't have to. She looked mean. She's not mean, she's just… Ethan stopped, realizing he didn't know how to finish that sentence. What was Victoria? Desperate? Ambitious? Someone who dragged him into her mess and then watched it explode in both their faces? She's just dealing with her own problems, he said finally. And I tried to help, but it didn't work out. Lily nodded, like this made perfect sense to her 7-year-old brain. Can we have pancakes? The whiplash from crisis to breakfast requests almost made Ethan smile. Yeah, we can have pancakes. He made them from a box mix, added chocolate chips because he was too tired to say no, and let Lily eat them in front of the TV while he checked his phone. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages. His inbox was a disaster of news alerts and people demanding answers. One message stood out. It was from Marcus. Marcus. Man, what the hell? You okay? Ethan typed back. Ethan. Not really, but I'm managing.
Marcus. People here are talking. Gary's pissed, says you made the company look bad. Ethan. I don't work there anymore anyway. Doesn't matter. Marcus. Still, this is crazy. You need anything? The offer surprised him. Marcus wasn't a close friend, just a coworker who'd never had much reason to care about Ethan's life beyond shift small talk. Ethan. I'm good. Thanks, though. Marcus. Let me know if that changes. Ethan set the phone down and watched Lily eat pancakes with the focus of someone conducting important scientific research. She had syrup on her chin and chocolate on her fingers, and for a moment everything else faded into background noise. His phone rang. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Another unknown number, and again. On the fourth call, he answered out of pure frustration. What? Mr. Cole, this is Amanda Pierce from the legal team at Hale Industries. Ms. Hale asked me to reach out. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. I don't want to talk to her. I understand, but there are some urgent matters we need to discuss. The media coverage has escalated, and we need to coordinate our response. Our response? There is no our. I'm done. Mr. Cole, I know you're upset, but walking away right now would be a mistake for both of you. I already got paid. I don't owe her anything else. It's not about what you owe. It's about protecting yourself. Right now, you're being painted as either a victim or a co-conspirator, and neither of those narratives serves you well. If you work with us, we can control the story. Control the story, Ethan repeated flatly. That's what got us into this mess. Actually, what got you into this mess was incomplete information and poor timing. We can fix that. How? Let me send you some documents. Review them, and then we'll talk. I'm not signing anything. I'm not asking you to. Just read them, please. Ethan wanted to refuse, to hang up and block the number and pretend Hale Industries didn't exist. But curiosity won out over anger. Fine, send them. The documents arrived 10 minutes later. Ethan opened them on his laptop while Lily watched cartoons, and what he read made his stomach turn. There were emails, dozens of them, all from Richard Hale to various board members, investors, and media contacts. And they painted a very clear picture of a man orchestrating a takedown. Richard had known about the grocery store footage for weeks. He'd held on to it, waiting for the perfect moment to release it. And he'd used that time to build a case against Victoria that went far beyond a fake relationship. He'd compiled financial discrepancies, questioned Victoria's strategic decisions, suggested she was emotionally unstable and prone to impulsive behavior. The fake boyfriend was just the crown jewel in a campaign designed to destroy her credibility entirely. But there was something else in the documents, something that made Ethan read the same paragraph 3 times to make sure he wasn't imagining it. Richard had been embezzling from the company. Small amounts, carefully hidden, routed through shell corporations and offshore accounts. Not enough to tank Hale Industries, but enough to line his pockets while he accused Victoria of mismanagement. And Victoria had the proof. Ethan's phone rang again. Amanda Pierce. Did you read them? She asked. Yeah. Then you understand what we're dealing with. Victoria's been sitting on evidence of embezzlement. She's been building a case.
Richard's smart. If she'd moved too fast, he would have covered his tracks. She needed everything airtight before she went public. And the fake relationship? Where does that fit in? It was a mistake, a desperate move in a moment of weakness. But it's not the story anymore. What's the story? The story is that Richard Hale is a corrupt former CEO who's been waging a personal vendetta against the woman who replaced him. The story is that he leaked private security footage to embarrass her and distract from his own crimes. And the story is that you got caught in the crossfire. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You want me to go public with this? We want you to tell the truth. All of it. The grocery store, the arrangement, the money. But in context, you were a man who needed help, and Victoria was a woman being cornered by her abusive ex-husband. You made a deal that felt reasonable at the time, and it spiraled out of control. That makes me look like an idiot. It makes you look human, which is better than what Richard's people are currently making you look like. And what are they making me look like? A gold digger who saw an opportunity and took it. Or worse, a plant that Richard hired to sabotage Victoria from the inside. Ethan felt heat crawl up his neck. That's insane. Welcome to corporate warfare. Insane is just Thursday. He rubbed his eyes, feeling the exhaustion settle deeper. What does Victoria want? She wants to talk to you, in person, today, if possible. I don't think that's a good idea. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be blunt with you. Right now, you're a loose end. Richard's people are going to keep coming after you, digging into your life, looking for anything they can use. If you work with us, we can protect you. If you don't, you're on your own. I've been on my own my whole life. Not like this, you haven't. Ethan looked at Lily, still absorbed in her cartoons, oblivious to the fact that her father's life was imploding in real time. Where does she want to meet? He asked. Victoria's apartment was nothing like Ethan expected. He'd imagined something cold and modern, all glass and steel and designer furniture that looked uncomfortable. Instead, it was warm, lived in, filled with books and plants and furniture that had clearly been chosen for comfort rather than appearances. She answered the door herself. No assistant or lawyer running interference. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy knot, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Thank you for coming, she said. Ethan stepped inside without responding. The door closed behind him, and suddenly the space felt too small, too intimate. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine. Victoria nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. I know you're angry. That's an understatement. I know. And you have every right to be. This is my fault. All of it. Yeah, it is. She flinched but didn't argue. I never meant for it to go this far. The grocery store was supposed to be one moment, one lie to get Richard off my back, and then it snowballed, and I kept making it worse because I didn't know how to stop. You could have told the truth. When? After the gala? After the dinner? Every day I waited made it harder to come clean, and I convinced myself that I could manage it, that I could keep all the pieces from falling apart until I got through the board meeting. She laughed, bitter and broken. I was wrong. Ethan walked to the window, looked out at the city stretched below. From up here, it looked clean, organized, like someone had arranged it on purpose. Nothing like the messy reality he lived in. Richard's been stealing from the company, he said. Yes. For how long? At least 2 years, maybe longer. And you've known about it. I've suspected for months, had proof for the last 6 weeks. Ethan turned to look at her. Why didn't you use it? Because Richard's lawyers are better than mine, and he has connections I don't have yet. If I'd gone after him without everything perfectly documented, he would have buried me. So I waited. I built the case piece by piece, made sure every transaction was traced, every account verified. And you were going to use it when? At the next board meeting, after I'd proven I could run the company successfully, after I'd stabilized operations and shown results. I wanted to remove him completely, not just win a battle. But he moved first. He always moves first. That's what I should have remembered. Victoria sat on the couch, looking smaller than Ethan had ever seen her. The grocery store footage was his insurance policy. He knew about it the whole time, and he waited until I thought I was safe. Until I'd committed to the lie in front of investors and board members and the press. So what now? Now I fight back. I release everything I have on Richard, the embezzlement, the shell companies, all of it.
I prove that his vendetta against me isn't about competence or leadership. It's about money and ego and the fact that he can't handle being replaced by a woman. And me? Victoria met his eyes. You tell your side of the story. You explain what happened, why you agreed to help me, what you got out of it. You own it. That'll destroy whatever reputation I have left, or it'll make you sympathetic. A regular person who got pulled into something bigger than he expected, who made a mistake but owned up to it. You make it sound easy. It won't be easy. It'll be terrible. But it's better than letting Richard control the narrative. Ethan sat in the chair across from her, suddenly too tired to stand. I have a daughter. This affects her too. I know. She's going to see this. Her friends, her teachers, everyone's going to know her dad lied on TV for money. Or they'll know her dad helped someone who needed it and got burned for doing the right thing. That's not what happened. It's close enough. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the city hummed with traffic and life and people who had no idea their world was about to shift. Amanda sent me the documents, Ethan said finally. The emails, the financial records. It's damning. It's everything I need to take him down. So do it. Why do you need me? Victoria leaned forward, her expression raw. Because going after Richard alone makes me look vindictive, like I'm just trying to destroy him because he embarrassed me. But if we both come forward, if we admit to the arrangement, explain the context, and then show what Richard's been doing, it becomes a bigger story. It becomes about corruption and abuse of power, not just a fake relationship. You want to use me again. I want us to work together. There's a difference. Not much of one. Ethan, please? I know I don't deserve your help. I know I've asked too much already. But this is bigger than both of us now. If Richard wins, he gets away with stealing millions of dollars. He gets to paint me as unstable and unfit, and every woman who tries to lead in this industry gets that much harder of a fight. That's not my problem. Isn't it? You think Richard cares about you? You think he won't keep coming after you just to make a point? Ethan thought about the reporters at his door, the phone calls from strangers, Marcus's message about Gary being angry. Thought about Lily asking if he was famous and the way his neighbors had looked at him that morning when he'd taken out the trash. What exactly are you asking me to do? He said. A press conference, tomorrow. We both show up, we tell the truth, we release the evidence against Richard, we take the hit for lying, but we make sure everyone understands why. And then it's over, really over. No more events, no more pretending. We go back to our separate lives. Ethan studied her face, looking for the manipulation, the angle, the next move in whatever game she was playing. But all he saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine regret. If I do this, he said slowly, I want something else. What? You said you could help with my job, that you had connections. I do. Then I want a real job. Not charity, not some fake position you create to make yourself feel better. A real job with real responsibilities that I'm actually qualified for. Victoria nodded. Done. I'm not finished. I want it in writing, a contract that says exactly what the position is, what it pays, what's expected. And I want it before the press conference. I'll have it drawn up tonight. And one more thing. What? After this is done, after the press conference and the fallout and whatever comes next, you leave me alone. No calls, no texts, no showing up at my door. We're done. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment, but she nodded. Okay, if that's what you want. It is. Then you have my word. Ethan stood. I need to go. Lily's with a neighbor, and I don't like leaving her too long. Victoria stood too. Thank you. For coming here, for listening, for not just walking away. I haven't agreed to anything yet. I know, but you're here. That's something. Ethan walked to the door, then stopped. Why did you grab my hand that night? In the store. There were other people around. You could have picked anyone. Victoria was quiet for a moment. You looked kind and tired, like someone who understood what it felt like to be cornered. That's a hell of a read from across a grocery aisle. I'm good at reading people. It's part of the job. And look where that got us. Yeah, Victoria said softly, look where that got us. Ethan left without another word. The contract arrived at 8 that night, delivered by courier in a manila envelope marked confidential. Ethan read it twice, checking every clause, every provision. It was for a position in operations management at a mid-size manufacturing firm owned by one of Hale Industries' partners. The salary was 40% more than what he'd been making at Patterson Foods. The benefits were better. The job description was detailed, specific, and as far as he could tell, legitimate. He signed it. At 9, Amanda Pierce called to confirm the press conference details. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at Hale Industries headquarters. Ethan would make a brief statement, Victoria would make hers, and then they'd take questions. Amanda would be there to run interference if things got hostile. "What should I wear?" Ethan asked, feeling ridiculous even as the words left his mouth. "Business casual. You want to look professional but approachable, like someone who made an honest mistake, not someone trying to con the system." "Great, no pressure. You'll be fine. Just tell the truth and don't let them rattle you." Easier said than done. "Mr. Cole, you walked a red carpet full of photographers and had dinner with investors who were actively trying to trip you up. You can handle a press conference." Ethan wasn't sure he believed her, but he appreciated the attempt. That night, he sat Lily down after dinner and tried to explain what was about to happen in terms a 7-year-old could understand. "Remember the lady from the store?" he asked. "The mean one?" "She's not mean, but yeah, her. She's in some trouble, and I'm going to help her explain what happened." "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do." "Is it going to be on TV again?" "Probably." Lily processed this with the seriousness of a judge reviewing evidence. "Are people going to be mean to you?" "Maybe. For a little while." "That's not fair." "No, it's not. But sometimes life isn't fair and we have to deal with it anyway." "I don't like that." "Me neither, kiddo." She climbed into his lap, small and warm and trusting in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. "I think you're brave." "I'm not brave, I'm just trying to fix a mistake." "That's what brave people do." Ethan held her tighter, wondering when his daughter had gotten so wise and wishing he could protect her from every ugly thing the world was about to throw their way. The morning of the press conference, Ethan woke up with his stomach in knots. He showered, shaved, put on the nicest clothes he owned, khakis and a button-down that had been Lily's approval before she left for school. Mrs. Chen had agreed to pick her up and keep her for the afternoon, which meant Ethan had one less thing to worry about. The car Victoria sent picked him up at 9:30. He'd expected her to be inside, but it was just him and the driver, moving through morning traffic toward a building he'd only ever seen from the outside. Hale Industries headquarters was all glass and steel, the kind of place that announced its importance before you even walked through the doors. Ethan felt immediately out of place, like he was wearing a costume to a party he hadn't been invited to. Amanda Pierce met him in the lobby. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and the kind of confidence that came from winning more fights than she'd lost. "Mr. Cole, good to finally meet you in person." "You too." "Nervous?" "Terrified." "Good. Means you're taking this seriously." She led him to an elevator, pressed a button for the 15th floor. "Victoria's already upstairs. We'll go over your statement one more time, make sure you're comfortable with it, and then we go live." "What if I mess up?" "You won't. And if you do, we'll handle it." The elevator doors opened to a floor that was all conference rooms and expensive art. Amanda led him to a room where Victoria was waiting, along with 2 other lawyers Ethan didn't recognize, and a PR specialist who looked like she'd been up all night. Victoria stood when he entered. She wore a navy suit, her hair pulled back, every inch the CEO. But when their eyes met, Ethan saw the same fear he was feeling. "Ready?" she asked. "No, but let's do it anyway." They went over the statements. Ethan's was short, 3 paragraphs explaining how they'd met, why he'd agreed to help, what he'd been paid. It was honest without being self-flagellating, factual without being defensive. Victoria's statement was longer. It covered the grocery store, the arrangement, the reasons behind it. And then it pivoted to Richard, the embezzlement, the vendetta, the manipulation. She had documents ready to distribute, financial records that showed exactly where the money had gone. At 9:55, they walked to the press room. It was packed. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters filled the seats, and the air buzzed with the kind of anticipation that came before someone's life got dissected in real time. Ethan felt his heart hammering against his ribs, felt Victoria's presence next to him, steady, despite everything, felt the weight of what they were about to do settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. Amanda stepped up to the podium first. Thank you all for coming. Ms. Hale and Mr. Cole will each make a brief statement and then we'll take questions. She stepped aside. Victoria moved forward. And just like that, it began. Victoria's voice was steady when she spoke, each word measured and deliberate like she'd practiced this 1,000 times in front of a mirror. But Ethan could see her hands gripping the edges of the podium, knuckles white with tension. 3 weeks ago, I made a decision that I'm not proud of, she began. I was being confronted by my ex-husband in a public place, and in a moment of panic, I asked a stranger to pretend to be my boyfriend. That stranger was Ethan Cole, and he agreed to help me. What started as a single moment of desperation became an arrangement that spiraled far beyond what either of us intended. The room was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. I paid Mr. Cole $10,000 to maintain this fiction through a series of public events. I convinced myself that this was a necessary strategy to counter a campaign of harassment and intimidation by my ex-husband, Richard Hale. I was wrong. The lie was unjustifiable, and I take full responsibility for putting Mr. Cole in an impossible position. She paused, took a breath, and Ethan saw her shift gears. But while I was wrong to fabricate a relationship, I was right about one thing. Richard Hale has been waging a systematic campaign to undermine my leadership and damage my credibility. And the reason he's been so determined to remove me from the CEO position is because I discovered something he didn't want anyone to know. Victoria nodded to Amanda, who began distributing folders to the reporters. Over the past 2 years, Richard Hale embezzled approximately $4.2 million from Hale Industries through a network of shell corporations and fraudulent consulting contracts. The evidence is in the documents you're receiving now: bank records, wire transfers, emails coordinating payments. Every transaction has been verified by independent auditors. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and the energy shifted from scandal to something bigger, something that would dominate headlines for weeks. Victoria raised her hand, and gradually the noise subsided. I held on to this information because I needed to be certain, because accusing a former CEO of embezzlement without ironclad proof would have destroyed my credibility and given Richard exactly what he wanted. But his decision to leak private security footage in an attempt to embarrass me has made it clear that he has no intention of stopping, so I'm stopping him. She stepped back from the podium, and Ethan realized it was his turn. His legs felt like they were made of water as he walked forward. The lights were too bright, the room too crowded, and every face looking at him seemed to be judging whether he was a victim or a con artist or something in between. He pulled out the paper with his statement, but when he looked down at it, the words seemed to blur together. He'd memorized it, practiced it, but now that he was standing here, it all felt wrong. Too polished, too scripted. Not him. He folded the paper and set it aside. "I'm not good at this," he said, and his voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "I don't do press conferences or public speaking, and I'm probably going to mess this up. But I'll tell you what happened." He saw Amanda tense in his peripheral vision, but he kept going. 3 weeks ago, I was at a grocery store with my daughter, trying to figure out how to afford cereal and keep the lights on. I just found out I was getting laid off from my job at Patterson Foods, and I was scared. Not the kind of scared where you worry about missing a vacation or cutting back on luxuries. The kind where you don't know how you're going to feed your kid next month. The room had gone quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Victoria Hale walked up to me in that store and grabbed my hand because her ex-husband was harassing her and she needed an out. And I went along with it because she looked desperate, and I know what desperate feels like. Then she offered me money, more money than I'd ever had at one time, to keep up the act for a week. And I said yes. He paused, looking out at the reporters, the cameras, all the people who would take his words and turn them into headlines. I said yes because I needed the money. Because my daughter deserved better than what I could give her on a factory worker's salary. Because I thought I could help someone and get helped in return. And that seemed fair. But it wasn't fair. It was a lie. And lies don't stay contained no matter how much you want them to. Someone in the front row raised a hand to ask a question, but Ethan shook his head. "I'm not done. You're going to ask me if I regret it, and the answer is complicated. Do I regret lying? Yes. Do I regret the fact that my daughter saw her father on the news being called a con artist? Absolutely. Do I regret helping someone who was being cornered by a man who turned out to be a criminal? No, I don't regret that part." He looked at Victoria, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I made a choice in that grocery store. It wasn't a great choice, and it had consequences I didn't see coming. But it was my choice, and I'm owning it. Ms. Hale made mistakes too, and she's owning those. And Richard Hale, Ethan's voice hardened. Richard Hale stole millions of dollars, harassed his ex-wife, and tried to destroy both of us to cover his own crimes. So if you're looking for a villain in this story, there's your guy. He stepped back from the podium. The questions came immediately, a barrage of voices talking over each other. Amanda stepped forward to moderate, pointing to reporters one at a time. Mr. Cole, do you still have a relationship with Ms. Hale? No. Ms. Hale, are you facing any criminal charges for the arrangement? We've been advised by counsel that while the arrangement was ethically questionable, it wasn't illegal. No charges have been filed. Mr. Cole, what are you going to do with the money you were paid? Ethan hadn't expected that question. He looked at the reporter, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a recorder held up like a weapon. I used some of it to pay my rent and keep my car from being repossessed, he said. The rest is going into a savings account for my daughter's future. College, if she wants it. Or whatever she needs. Ms. Hale, why should the board allow you to remain as CEO after this? Victoria's expression didn't waver. Because I've increased operational efficiency by 18%, stabilized 3 underperforming divisions, and uncovered fraud that was bleeding this company dry. My personal mistakes don't change the fact that I'm good at my job. Do you have evidence that Richard Hale orchestrated the security footage leak? We have emails from Richard to a media contact offering exclusive information about my personal life. We believe that information was the SaveMart footage, though we can't prove it definitively. Mr. Cole, are you pursuing legal action against anyone involved? Ethan blinked. He hadn't even thought about that. No, I just want to move on with my life. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, some reasonable, some designed to provoke. Amanda shut it down when a reporter asked Ethan if he'd sleep with Victoria for money, and the 3 of them walked out of the press room into a hallway that felt too quiet after all that noise. Ethan's hands were shaking. Adrenaline was still coursing through his system, making everything feel sharp and unreal. You went off script, Amanda said, but she didn't sound angry. That was risky. It was honest, Ethan said. That's what you wanted, right? Honestly executed better than I expected. She looked at Victoria. The Richard evidence is going to dominate the news cycle. Financial crimes always do. You'll still take heat for the fake relationship, but it'll be secondary to the embezzlement story. Good, Victoria said. She looked exhausted, like she'd just run a marathon. What happens now? Now the board meets to discuss Richard's status. Criminal investigators will get involved, and both of you lay low for a few days while the media chews on this. I don't have anywhere to lay low, Ethan said. I have a daughter to pick up from school and a life to get back to. Amanda nodded. Fair enough, but expect follow-up calls. This isn't over. Ethan turned to leave, but Victoria's voice stopped him. Ethan, can we talk? Just for a minute. He looked at Amanda, who took the hint and walked down the hall to give them privacy. Thank you, Victoria said, for doing this, for being honest up there. I didn't do it for you. I know, but thank you anyway. They stood in the hallway, 2 people who'd collided in a grocery store and somehow ended up here, in the aftermath of something neither of them had seen coming. I meant what I said, Ethan told her, about being done. The contract you gave me, the job, that's professional. But us? We're finished. I know. I don't want calls or texts or surprise visits. I don't want to be part of your world anymore. I understand. Victoria's voice was quiet. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. Yeah, me too. He walked away before she could say anything else, before the moment could turn into something it didn't need to be. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Richard Hale was arrested 3 days later on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and wire fraud. The news coverage was relentless. Financial analysts dissecting the shell companies, former employees coming forward with stories of Richard's manipulation, board members scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. Victoria's fake relationship barely registered as a footnote in comparison. Ethan watched it all unfold from his apartment, where he'd barricaded himself and Lily against the remnants of media attention. The reporters had mostly moved on to Richard, but a few persistent ones still called asking for follow-up interviews. He ignored them all. His phone rang on Saturday morning. Unknown number, but something made him answer. Mr. Cole, this is James Morrison from Morrison Industrial Solutions. Victoria Hale sent over your contract and resume. I wanted to reach out personally. Ethan sat up straighter. Okay. The position starts Monday if you're available. I know the timeline's aggressive, but we're in the middle of a logistics overhaul and could use someone with your background. Monday works. Excellent. I'll have HR send over the onboarding documents. And Mr. Cole, I want you to know that I read about what happened. What you did took guts. That's the kind of integrity we value here. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Thank you. See you Monday. The call ended and Ethan stared at his phone like it might explode.
He had a job, a real job, with benefits and a salary that would let him breathe for the first time in years. The contract had been legitimate. Victoria had kept her word. That realization sat uncomfortably in his chest. Lily came into the living room wearing her pajamas and carrying her stuffed rabbit. Daddy, can we go to the park? Yeah, kiddo, we can go to the park.
They spent the afternoon on the swings, Lily laughing as she went higher and higher while Ethan pushed and tried to remember what normal felt like. Other parents were there with their kids, and a few of them looked at him with recognition, but nobody said anything. Small mercies. On the way home, Lily asked the question he'd been dreading. Are people still mad at you? Some of them, probably, but it doesn't matter. Why not? Because I know what I did and why I did it. That's more important than what strangers think. Lily considered this with the seriousness of a judge. I'm not mad at you. Good, because you're the only person whose opinion I actually care about. Even more than the fancy lady? Especially more than her. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat on the couch and pulled up the news coverage on his laptop. The headlines were all about Richard now. His arrest, the court proceedings, the mounting evidence against him. Victoria appeared in some of the articles, but mostly as the CEO who'd uncovered the fraud. There was one interview with her recorded the day after the press conference. The reporter asked if she regretted how she'd handled the situation with Ethan. I regret putting him in that position, Victoria said, and she looked directly at the camera. Ethan Cole didn't ask to be part of this. He was just someone trying to get by, and I used that. I'll have to live with that. Do you think you'll speak to him again? I hope not, for his sake. Ethan closed the laptop. The weeks that followed had a strange rhythm to them. Ethan started his new job on Monday, and it was everything the contract had promised. Challenging, legitimate, paying enough that he could actually save money instead of just treading water. His coworkers knew who he was, but they didn't treat him like a scandal. They treated him like someone who knew his stuff, and that was enough. Lily adjusted faster than he expected. The attention at school faded as new gossip took over, and soon she was back to worrying about homework and whether she could get a hamster for her birthday. Marcus texted him once to say congratulations on the new job and ask if it was weird working for a company connected to Hale Industries. Ethan. It's fine, completely separate from all that. Marcus. Still. Wild how things worked out. Ethan. Yeah, wild. He didn't hear from Victoria. Not a text, not a call, nothing. She'd kept her promise to leave him alone, and Ethan told himself he was grateful for that. Mostly, he was. 3 months later, Ethan was leaving work when he saw her. She was standing next to a black car in the parking lot, wearing a coat and looking like she'd been waiting. When she saw him, she straightened, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Ethan walked over because ignoring her felt childish. What are you doing here? He asked. I wanted to see how you were doing, Victoria said. I know I said I'd leave you alone, and I will. After this, I needed to know you were okay. I'm fine. Job's good. Lily's good. We're fine. I'm glad. They stood in the awkward silence of two people who'd shared something intense and didn't know how to be normal around each other. How are you? Ethan asked, because it felt rude not to. Surviving. The board kept me on as CEO, which is more than I expected. Richard's trial starts next month. My lawyers say he'll probably take a plea deal. Good. Yeah. Victoria looked down at her hands. I wanted to apologize. Again, I know I already did, but I don't think I really understood what I put you through until after. When I saw the interviews, the way people talked about you, I'm sorry. I know. Do you forgive me?
Ethan thought about it, really thought about it, because it felt like the kind of question that deserved honesty. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe someday, but right now I'm still dealing with the fallout. People still recognize me. I still get asked about it, so forgiveness feels like something I can't afford yet. Victoria nodded. That's fair. Why are you really here? She looked up at him, and there was something in her expression that looked like vulnerability. Because I miss talking to you. Because you were honest in a way most people in my life aren't. And because I wanted to see if there was any chance that we could, I don't know, start over. Not as CEO and employee or fake couple or anything complicated. Just as people who know each other. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Part of him wanted to say yes, to let go of the anger and the frustration and see where it led. But the bigger part of him knew that wasn't fair to either of them. I don't think that's a good idea, he said. Why not? Because we're not people who just know each other. We're people who lied to each other and everyone else, who got caught, who barely survived it. That's not a foundation for anything good. People have started from worse places. Maybe. But I have a daughter who comes first, and I can't risk bringing more chaos into her life because I'm curious about what ifs. Victoria's face fell, but she nodded. You're right. I shouldn't have come. She turned to go, and Ethan felt the moment slipping away from him. Victoria. She stopped. For what it's worth, he said, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you were in an impossible situation and made bad choices. We both did. But you're good at what you do. And you deserve to succeed on your own terms. I hope you get that. Victoria's eyes were bright when she looked back at him. Thank you. You're welcome. Now go, and don't come back. I won't. She got in the car and drove away, and Ethan stood there watching until the taillights disappeared around the corner. That night, he picked up Lily from Mrs. Chen's apartment and made dinner, spaghetti with jarred sauce, nothing fancy, but Lily ate it like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. They watched a movie after, some animated thing about talking animals, and Lily fell asleep halfway through with her head on his shoulder. Ethan carried her to bed, tucked her in, and sat in the living room with the TV playing something he wasn't watching. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. This is Victoria. I'm deleting your number after this. I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for being kind when you didn't have to be. I hope you and Lily have a wonderful life. Ethan read it twice, then deleted it. He didn't respond. 6 months after the press conference, Ethan's life had settled into something that felt sustainable. The job was going well. He'd been promoted to senior operations coordinator, which came with a raise and actual respect from his colleagues. Lily was thriving in school, asking for a dog instead of a hamster, and had stopped asking about the fancy lady entirely. The media attention had faded to nothing. Richard Hale had taken a plea deal and was serving 8 years in federal prison. Victoria was still CEO of Hale Industries, and according to the business news, she was doing well. Ethan didn't follow the coverage closely, but he saw headlines occasionally and felt a distant sense of relief that she'd survived. He went on a date once, set up by a coworker who swore her friend was perfect for him. It was fine. Dinner, conversation, no chemistry. The woman asked about the Victoria Hale thing, because of course she did, and Ethan gave her the short version he'd practiced a dozen times. She seemed satisfied, but she didn't call him again. That was fine too. On a Saturday in early spring, Ethan took Lily to the park they'd been going to since she was 3. She was on the monkey bars, showing off for a group of kids who probably didn't care but were polite enough to watch anyway, when his phone rang. Morrison Industrial Solutions, his boss. Ethan, sorry to call on a weekend. Quick question. Are you available Tuesday afternoon? We've got a potential partnership meeting with one of our suppliers, and I'd like you there. Sure. What time? 2 o'clock. I'll send you the details. Thanks. The call ended and Ethan went back to watching Lily navigate the monkey bars like a tiny gymnast. Tuesday came, and Ethan showed up to the conference room 10 minutes early with a notebook and the kind of nervous energy that came before important meetings. His boss, James Morrison, was already there, along with 2 other colleagues. Ethan, good. Let me introduce you to our guests. The door opened and a man in his 50s walked in, followed by an assistant with a tablet, followed by Victoria Hale. Ethan's brain stuttered. Victoria saw him and stopped mid-step. For half a second, her composure cracked, and he saw pure surprise. Then the mask came back, smooth and professional.
James, good to see you, the older man said. This is Victoria Hale, our CEO. She wanted to be part of this discussion personally. James shook hands with both of them. Of course. We're honored. This is my team, Sarah from procurement, David from logistics, and Ethan Cole, our senior operations coordinator. Victoria shook hands with each of them, and when she got to Ethan, her grip was firm and brief. Mr. Cole, she said, her voice perfectly neutral. Ms. Hale. They sat down, and the meeting began. It was professional, focused, all business. They discussed supply chain optimization, delivery schedules, contract terms. Ethan contributed when it made sense, took notes, and tried not to think about the fact that Victoria was sitting 6 feet away looking at spreadsheets like they were the most interesting thing in the world. She didn't look at him directly, not once. When the meeting ended an hour later, everyone stood and exchanged pleasantries. James invited the Hale Industries team to stay for coffee, but the older man declined, citing another appointment. Victoria followed him to the door, and Ethan thought that was it. She was leaving. They'd both survived an awkward professional encounter, and life would go on. But she paused at the door and turned back. Mr. Morrison, do you mind if I borrow Mr. Cole for a moment? I have a question about the logistics proposal. James looked surprised, but nodded. Of course. Ethan? Ethan followed Victoria into the hallway, his heart beating harder than it should. She walked a few steps away from the conference room, then turned to face him. I didn't know you worked here, she said quietly. I figured. If I had known, I would have sent someone else. It's fine. Is it? Ethan looked at her. She looked good, tired, but good. Hair shorter than he remembered, suit perfectly tailored, the kind of person who belonged in boardrooms and strategy sessions. Yeah, he said. It's fine, we're adults, we can handle a business meeting. I know, I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. You didn't. They stood there in the hallway, and Ethan felt the weight of all the things they weren't saying. You look good, Victoria said finally. Happy. I am. Mostly. I'm glad. How about you? I'm surviving. The board's finally stopped second-guessing every decision, and Richard's out of the picture, so things are better. Good. Silence again, heavier this time. I should go, Victoria said. My team's waiting. Yeah. She started to walk away, then stopped. Ethan? Yeah? I meant what I said in that text. I hope you have a wonderful life. You too. She smiled, small and sad, and walked down the hall without looking back. Ethan stood there for a moment, then went back to the conference room where James was already pulling up the next item on the agenda. That night, Lily asked him why he seemed distracted. Just work stuff, he said. Good work stuff or bad work stuff? Weird work stuff. What's weird mean? It means complicated, but it's fine. Lily accepted this with the easy trust of someone who believed her father could handle anything. Ethan wished he had that kind of confidence. He thought about Victoria a lot over the next few weeks. Wondered if she'd meant what she said about not knowing he worked there. Wondered if seeing him had been as disorienting for her as it had been for him. Wondered if she ever thought about that night in the grocery store and wished she'd made a different choice. But he didn't reach out. Didn't text or call or try to turn the chance encounter into something more. Because the truth was, they'd both moved on. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough that going backward felt like a mistake. 3 years later, Ethan was at Lily's school talent show, watching her perform a piano piece she'd been practicing for months. She hit every note, grinned at the audience when she finished, and Ethan felt the kind of pride that made his chest hurt. After the show, he was waiting in the lobby when someone tapped his shoulder. He turned around and saw Victoria. She looked different. Softer somehow. Less armored. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair down, no makeup that he could see. She looked like a person, not a CEO. Hi, she said. Hi. My niece is in Lily's class. I'm here with my sister. She gestured to a woman across the lobby who was talking to a teacher. I didn't expect to see you. Small world. Yeah. Lily ran up then, breathless and excited. Daddy, did you see? I didn't mess up. You were perfect, kiddo. Lily noticed Victoria and tilted her head. Do I know you? No, Victoria said gently.
I'm just someone your dad used to know. Oh, okay. Lily turned back to Ethan. Can we get ice cream? Sure. Go grab your stuff. Lily ran off, and Ethan looked at Victoria. She's beautiful, Victoria said. Thanks. You did good. With her, with your life. You should be proud. I am. Victoria glanced over at her sister, who was waving her over. I should go. It was good to see you, Ethan. You too. She started to walk away, then paused. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever think about that night? In the grocery store? Ethan thought about lying, about saying no and keeping things clean. But honesty had always been the thing between them, even when everything else was a mess. Sometimes, he said. Not as much as I used to, but yeah, sometimes. Me too. Victoria smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I think about what might have happened if I'd just walked away. If I dealt with Richard on my own. And I think we both would have been fine, but we wouldn't have learned what we needed to learn. Which is that desperation makes us do things we wouldn't normally do, and that sometimes the mess is worth it, even when it doesn't end the way we want. Ethan nodded. Yeah, I can live with that. Victoria's sister called her name and she waved back. I really do have to go. But Ethan? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For being kind when I didn't deserve it. You deserved it more than you thought. She walked away, and this time Ethan didn't feel the same weight he'd felt before. He felt something lighter, something that might have been closure. Lily came back with her backpack, and they went for ice cream. She got chocolate chip with sprinkles and told him about every detail of the talent show while he listened and nodded and tried to memorize the way she looked when she was happy. Later, after Lily was in bed, Ethan sat on the couch and thought about the question Victoria had asked. Did he think about that night? Yeah, he did. Not with regret or anger anymore, but with something more complicated. Gratitude, maybe, for the way it had changed things. For the job it had led to, the stability it had given him, the reminder that sometimes helping someone, even in a messy, imperfect way, could lead somewhere good. He'd made mistakes. Victoria had made mistakes. But they'd both survived, and in the end, maybe that was all anyone could ask for. The next morning, Ethan got a text from an unknown number. Unknown. It was good to see you yesterday. I won't reach out again, but I wanted you to know that I'm grateful our paths crossed. Even if it was messy. Take care of yourself and Lily. Ethan read it twice, then typed a response. Ethan, you too. Good luck with everything. He hit send, then deleted the conversation. That was it. The end of a story that had started in a grocery store with a lie and ended 3 years later with something that felt almost like peace. Ethan didn't believe in fairy tales or perfect endings. He believed in doing the best you could with what you had, in showing up for the people who mattered, in being honest even when it cost you. And in the end, that was enough. Because life wasn't about the lies people told or the mistakes they made. It was about what they did after, whether they learned, whether they grew, whether they chose to be better. Ethan had chosen. So had Victoria. And maybe that was the real story all along.